go on with another surah, inshallah, which would all of us would benefit from the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Surah Al Fajr is the 89th surah of the Quran in the present order. You know that the order of the Quran in which we read today is not the order of revelation. The revelation, of course, came in a different order. So in the order of revelation, Surah Al Fajr have come much earlier, but it has been placed at Surah 89 in the Quran. And apparently this order in which we are reading is an advice of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the way the longer surahs have come at the beginning, and then we move on to medium length surahs, and then we move to the shorter surahs at the end. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before delving into discussion about Surah Al Fajr, let me read a couple of hadith regarding the merits of reciting this surah. One hadith is from Ubay ibn Ka'b. You know, Ubay ibn Ka'b is a very, very respected companion of the Prophet, an expert in the Quran, and one of those who have been very instrumental in the authentication of the Quran as we read that today. He reports a hadith from the Prophet, a very long hadith from the Prophet about the merits of every single surah in the Quran, from Surah Al-Baqarah and Hamd to Surah An-Nas. Now about this surah, he says, Ubay ibn Ka'b an al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi قال ومن قرأها في ليال عشر غفر الله له ومن قرأها سائر الأيام كانت له نورا يوم القيامة. Whoever recites this in the 10 nights. Now, we have Layal and Ashr in this surah. We'll discuss that, what these 10 nights are. And apparently these are the first Ashra of the Hajj. These are the Layal and Ashr. So whoever recites this surah, whether, of course, he doesn't mention whether in Salat or outside the Salat, so it should be unrestricted, whether we recite it in Salat or outside Salat. Man qara'aha fi layalin ashr ghafara Allahu lahu. Allah will give him maghfirah. That's the best thing we can receive from Allah. وَمَنْ قَرَأَهَا سَائِرَ الْأَيَّامِ كَانَتْ لَهُ نُورًا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And whoever recites it in other days, other than these Layal and Ashr, will be a light for him on the Day of Judgment. You know, light is something that we need most on the Day of Judgment. And this light is not the physical light, it's the spiritual light by which it enlightens our soul. It enlightens our way to paradise. يَوْمَ تَرَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ تَسْعَى نُورُهُمْ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَبِأَيْمَانِهِمْ. So we need that nur on the Day of Judgment to find our way to paradise. Of course, this is metaphorical. However, this light is something which we need there very much. And also, we have the continuation which says, يَوْمَ يَقُولُ الْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ انظرونا للمؤمنين والمؤمنات انظرونا نقتبس من نوركم. Munafiqun would say, wait for us so that we can take benefit from your lights. And of course, it is said, قِيلَ ارْجِعُوا وَرَاءَكُمْ فَالْتَمِسُوا نُورًا. Go back to the world and bring light. No one can use any other person's light on the Day of Judgment. Okay, this is one hadith from Ubay ibn Ka'b rahmatullah alayh. And the other hadith is from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. Dawood ibn Farqad reports from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, قال اقرأوا سورة الفجر في فرائضكم ونوافلكم. Recite Surah Fajr in your fara'id, that is your obligatory salat, and in your nawafil, in your supererogatory or mustahab salat. فإنها سورة الحسين بن علي عليه السلام. This is the Surah of Hussein ibn Ali. من قرأها كان مع الحسين بن علي عليه السلام يوم القيامة في درجته من الجنة. Whoever recites this surah will be with Hussein ibn Ali on the day of judgment in his grade in paradise. Wow, that's unbelievable. Why this is called Surah Hussein ibn Ali? Because the last verse of this surah refers to a soul which is absolutely purified and returns to the Lord. Why the Lord is pleased with him and he is pleased with the Lord. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. This is what we have at the end of the verse. Inshallah, we'll discuss that. And who is the most outstanding instance of an-nafsul mutma'inna, the tranquil soul? Who is the most outstanding person who returns to the Lord? Then Imam Hussein alayhi salam, with that absolute submission, devotion, and Allah is pleased with him. So that's why, and he's pleased with Allah. Despite all those hardships, difficulties that he met, he is pleased with Allah about, of course, what he will do there for him and what he has done in this world. After that, of course, spectacular martyrdom, what Allah has done for Imam Hussein in this world. So that's why it's called, in the word of Imam Ja'far Sadiq, probably that's why he says this is Surah Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. Okay, this is about the merits of recitation. We have 5 oaths here: Qasam, wal Fajr, wal Ayal Ashr, wal Shaf, wal Watr, wal Layli idha Yasr. So 5 oaths. Why Allah uses oaths? To prove something, to establish something. Does he need oaths? Well, these oaths, as Sheikh Mughniya says in his Tafseer Kashif, these are to actually say this is haqq. It's not for, of course, it's just for emphasizing the importance of what comes after it. It's not that Allah wants to prove himself by oath or by qasam. It's because after this qasam, a person would find out that what is going to be said is very, very important, and it is something which means a lot for the person. Here in Tafsir al-Kashif, it says, Al-Murad bil-Qasam huna al-Hujjah. This is the proof of the veracity of what I'm going to say. I mean, if you look at the harmony of these matters, if you look at the greatness, the knowledge, power which has been used in these things, then you will find out that Allah is telling you an important thing. Okay, Fajr, of course, is, the meaning is very clear. It is the beginning of the day when that light of Subh al-Sadiq comes to the sky, and therefore it is the beginning of the day. It is the departure of the nights. And you know, night and day, light and darkness are always metaphors for good and evil, for hardship and ease, for comfort and difficulty. And when Allah says, Wal Fajr, it gives a hope that the hardships, the difficulties, the darkness of this world will go away one day. And we enter the light of the next world. I call it light because Allah calls it light, as I mentioned in those surahs. And also it's light because the darkness, which is actually wailing us to comprehend Allah, to have a vision of the heart from Allah, will go away. So this qasam is very nice, especially at the end of these 5 qasams. It says, وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ, by the night when it goes away, when it departures. And this is the beginning and the end are very beautiful. You know, hope, as we have in a hadith, we have a long hadith about the troops of shaitan and the troops of jahl, the troops of uh, ignorance, and the troops of aql, the troops of intellect and knowledge. And in that hadith, which is very long, about 90 something troops are mentioned for aql, for intellect, and then the opposite for jahl. One of those things, one of those troops of intellect, which is mentioned in that hadith, is hope. A person who believes in Allah never becomes desperate, never loses hope. Why? Because كل يوم هو في شأن. Every day he's in charge of something new, because he is in charge of everything. And therefore, I mean, you see someone dies, but someone else comes to this world. You see a flower withers, but and other flowers come. We always have to have this hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when Allah, metaphorically, if we take this as a sort of allusion to something higher than just physical oath, then of course Allah is telling us that you always have to be hopeful. In the face of all difficulties, you have to be hopeful as well. Now, the commentators, because of course, as I said, the meaning is very clear. Fajr is the beginning of the day, the beginning of life, because in night we actually are like dead, we sleep. And in the morning, when the light comes, we go to work, we study, we interact with each other. So it's very clear. It doesn't need to allude to any particular Fajr, any particular day. However, some commentators have tried to somehow restrict this to particular Fajr of particular days. So, for example, it is reported from Mujahid, who was a student of Abdullah ibn Abbas. You know, we don't have anyone more knowledgeable than Abdullah ibn Abbas in the commentary of the Quran. Of course, putting Imam Ali aside, because Ahlul Bayt are very different. Their knowledge is inspired to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, we are talking about ordinary knowledgeable people. And Ibn Abbas is actually the head of all commentators in the ancient Islamic era. And everyone would like to report from him. Mujahid was a student of Ibn Abbas. Al-Dhahhak was not a direct student of him, but of course he reports from him a lot. He says that Dhahhak and Mujahid, they say this refers to Fajr al-Hajjah, the Fajr of the first day of the Hajjah. You know, the Hajjah is a very, very important month. It's the month of Hajj, and it's the month of Haram. It's one of those respected months. So, because in the 10 nights and 10 days of the Hajjah at the beginning, we are recommended to pay more attention to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also we prepare for Hajj. Towards the end of this Ashra, we begin our Hajj on the day of Arafah, and then on the 10th day of the Hajjah, we have the Eid. So they say this refers, because of course we have Layal and Ashr. So here this Fajr refers to فجر ذي الحجة لأن الله تعالى قرن الأيام به فقال وليال عشر, because this layal and ash comes with him, so it refers to Ashr, Fajr ذي الحجة. I don't think that's a very strong proof. While of course layal and Ashr, the 10 nights, putting Fajr just in company of Layl, then Allah talking about 10 nights, which are nights of worship, or the 10 nights that Allah actually added to the appointment of Musa for worship. It means these nights are very important in bringing light to the heart. Maybe that's the case. And some people have said, like Qatada, who's another student of Ibn Abbas, this is the Fajr Awwal al-Muharram, the first day of Muharram. Why? Because the first day of Muharram is the first day of the year. And we begin our year with the first day of Muharram, of course, in lunar system. So that is the Fajr of Awal al-Muharram. These are actually opinions of these commentators, nothing reported from the Prophet or from Imam alayhi salam. So we take them, we just take them as ideas coming from different commentators. And it's very good to have these ideas. One thing that I want to mention here is that we never have to be so opinionated about one opinion on a verse or on interpretation of certain verses, because there are many possibilities. It's good to have to widen our scope of understanding of verses of the Quran by going to what the commentators say. Of course, what commentators say doesn't necessarily mean that they are correct or they are the intended meaning of these verses. However, as I said, it broadens our scope of understanding. And from Abdullah ibn Abbas, rahmatullah alayhi, it says what we said, that it is the Fajr of every day. It's the day. It's the breaking of the day. And that is, of course, something which really we need to ponder upon. Every day we wake up, it's a new blessing from Allah to us. You know, if we are engaged in our day to do good things, whether it's good things in terms of deen and sharia, good things in terms of helping people, good things in terms of understanding who we are, what we have to do, good things in terms of studying, increasing our knowledge, we know that that day is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's just a gift given to us. That's very important, isn't it? I mean, thinking about it from this perspective, then of course, every morning that we wake up, we have to thank Allah that He has returned our soul to our body and has given us a new day. And new day means new learning, new earning, new excitements, new loves, and all these things, that love between wife and husband, wife between children, the parents, and vice versa. It is great blessing every day. There is one hadith that I remember that I think it's from Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. I cannot remember exactly now, but it says that every morning when the day comes, it says to the person, this is metaphorical, isn't it? I'm a new day. I never have met you before, and you never have met me before, isn't it? Because yesterday was not today, and tomorrow is not today, and you are not going to meet me again, and I'm not going to meet you again. So try to fill me with what benefits you. It's great, isn't it? So let's move on. Wal Fajr walayal ashr, and the 10 nights. Now, the 10 nights, most of the commentators say that this is the 10 nights of the Hajj. And Allah has actually glorified it. Allah has mentioned it here as a glorification of these 10 nights, so that people rush to do good things in these 10 nights, to avoid evil in these 10 nights, to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of course attain with the good obedience the reward, which is the paradise. Sheikh Tusi says, Sheikh Tusi is one of the greatest commentators in Islam. I don't want to say in Shia. Of course, he was a Shia scholar. However, he's one of the greatest commentators in Islam. And he says that a group of people say that this is the 10 days of Muharram, the beginning. However, what is reliable is the first one. That's the 10 nights of Dhul Hajj. Others have said that it is the 10 nights of the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Now, why? Because, of course, we have Layal al-Qadr, in those 10 nights, of course, 21st and 23rd of Ramadan. It is good, however, as I said, Sheikh Tusi says the reliable view is that it's the 10 nights of the Hajj. And it is said that these 10 nights of the Hajj are actually corresponds to those 10 nights that Allah added to Moses' appointment. وَوَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 30 ليلة فأتممناها بعشر فتم ميقات ربه 40 ليلة. So we made an appointment with Musa for 30 nights, and then we added another 10 nights to complete the duration of his worship, special worship to receive Torah. And some say this corresponds to that. Anyhow, wal fajr wa layalin ashr. Maybe we stop here for question and answer. And if there is no Q&A, we can continue. If there are some questions up to here, then I'm very pleased to discuss it with you.
Thank you, Sheikh Bahmanpour. So if anybody wants to ask any questions at this point, or wants to put a question in the chat box, please feel free to do so. We'll just give you a moment if you want to type anything, or if you want to unmute. I'm just checking the chat box to see if anybody's typing, but it doesn't look like anybody's typing at the moment. And if nobody has any questions, no, okay. So, okay, Bismillah, Sheikh. I think if you're happy to continue.
We actually leave a bit more time at the end.
Absolutely, yeah. If you prefer.
Receive Q&A, receive questions and answers, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay.
Asma, I can ask a question.
Sorry, Sheikh.
Yeah. Sheikh, what is the significance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala picking the different things in swearing? Wal Fajr, wal Ashr, the different elements by what Allah has used at the start of the first 4 ayats in swearing by the 10 nights, by the dawn, by the even and the cold, and the night when it passes. Is there any significance in that?
Well, actually, by these oaths, Allah wants to draw our attention to the significance of these things. And because these things are actually creations of Allah, or gifts of Allah, blessings of Allah, it will actually draw our attention to Him and to His blessings, and then to what He wants to say afterwards. And as you know, these qasams are repeated in many verses, or appear at the beginning of many verses, for example. Even at the middle of verses. For example, فَلَا أُقْسَمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ, I swear by the place of the stars, for example, in the middle of Surah Al-Waqi'. Or, for example, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا, I swear by the sun and the light which enlightens the day, and by the moon which follows it, and also in many, many other verses that we have these oaths. Allah, here we have 5 oaths, or maybe 4, or 2 of them may be just regarded as one. But the important matter is that it is not the oath, it's not the importance of these things which make the oath important. It's the oath itself which gives us to pay attention, tells us to pay attention to these matters. And then by paying attention, we have Fajr every day, okay? But do we pay enough attention to it? Do we reflect? Do we contemplate on the importance of Fajr every day? No, we don't. We just wake up and just move out, have our breakfast, go to work. By making these oaths, Allah wants to tell us, wait a second. Of course, you wake up, you are very busy, you have to go to work, you are a bit late, but wait a second. Have you pondered on the Fajr at all? We are passing our nights, every night we may be watching TV, doing certain chores and these things, but wait a second, have you paid attention to those 10 nights of Dhul Hijjah, how important they are? We can talk about every oath in this vein. So these are the importance of these matters in our life, because all these things are very important in our life. And Allah wants to tell us that don't take these things for granted. And by paying attention to these, actually we can be transferred to what blessings Allah has given us.
Thank you, Sheikh. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on then.
Bismillah.
Okay, the next, that's the third oath, which may be the third and fourth, is washaf'i wal watr, by the even and the odd. By the even and odd, maybe it means by everything. Because Allah says, وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ, from everything we have created a pair. We may not actually know exactly what pairs are there in creation, but Allah says, I am the one who doesn't have any pair. So that's fard, watr. And of course the creation is shaf. It means I swear by myself and by the creation. I swear by Khaliq and by Makhluq. This is the opinion of Baydawi, al-Baydawi, a very famous Sunni commentator whose Tafseer, Anwar al-Tanzil, has been used by Faiz Kashani to create a Tafseer adding the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt to it, called Tafseer al-Safi. Both tafasir are very good. This is one meaning of it. The other meaning is that everything in this world are either in pairs, like some of the plants, animals, human beings, or they don't have pairs. They are like other objects, animals. There are certain animals who don't have pairs. Objects, mountains, rivers, they don't have pairs. So when we say shaf'a wal watr, it means by everything. Like, for example, in other words, we have وَلَا رَطْبٍ وَلَا يَابِسٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. There's no dry and wet unless it is in the clear book. So dry and wet means that it means everything, isn't it? Because things are either dry or wet. It's a sort of metaphorical exaggeration. And here we may say shaf'a wal watr means everything. However, the commentators have given other meanings, other possible meanings. As I said, these are to broaden our scope of understanding for these verses. So, for example, they say, in Salat we have shaf and watr, isn't it? Maybe after Layal and Ashra, well, that's a possibility. Just listen carefully. Maybe after Layal and Ashra, that 10 very important nights of worship, whether it's the 10 nights of the end of Ramadan or the 10 nights of the Hajj, we, just before the dawn, after we have done Salatul Layl, it's accompanied by Shaf'a wal Watr, isn't it? And these 3 rak'ahs, Shaf and Watr, are the most important part of Salatul Layl. Of course, Salatul Layl, those 8 rak'ahs which goes before Shaf'a wal Watr is all called Salatul Layl, and then it is accompanied by Shaf'a wal Watr. However, altogether we call it Salatul Layl. So they say Shaf'a wal Watr is referring to those 3 rak'ahs, which are very important in our spiritual growth just before dawn. Very important. Why Allah is swearing by that? It means that if you want closeness, if you want understanding that sort of ma'rifah which other people don't have it, then come for Shaf'a wal Watr. This is where you can find it. By this type and this time of worship. That is what you know. So they say Shaf'a wal Watr means referring to Shaf'a wal Watr in Salatul Layl. Others say that, well, some of the prayers are shaf, they are even, and some are watr, odd. Like, for example, Salatul Maghrib is odd, 3 rak'ahs, and others are 4 rak'ahs. So that is what it means by it. Well, I don't know whether that is that's a possibility to. I mean, we can say that that can be an instance of Shaf'a wal Watr. And also, Shaf'a wal Watr have been taken to refer to certain days. Again, because we are talking about the Hajj, they say Ash-Shaf is Yawm Nahr, Eid al-Adha is the 10th day, and Watr is Arafah, is 9th day, isn't it? What we can say is that Shaf is whatever Allah has created as pair, and Watr, it is either referred to himself, which has no pair, or to those creations which are not in pairs, do not have zawj. This idea of being Salatul Shaf'a wal Watr actually appeals to me very much. We have other opinions here, but appeals to me very much because Allah talks about light, first of all, then talks about Layal and Ashr, which are the source of giving light to our heart, and then talks about Ash-Shaf'a wal Watr, which are the instrument, which are very instrumental in attaining that light. So here, Fajr may mean the spiritual light, which comes to the heart. In Surah Al-Muzammil, we have this verse, إِنَّ نَاشِئَةَ اللَّيْلِ هِيَ أَشَدُّ وَطْئًا وَأَقْوَمُ قِيلًا. The waking up at night and praying before dawn, it is أَشَدُّ وَطْئًا وَأَقْوَمُ قِيلًا. أَقْوَمُ قِيلًا means that when you say something, you say, I believe in this, how you prove it? Okay, this is the best proof of it. أَقْوَمُ قِيلًا. It is stronger in your claim. But أَشَدُّ وَطْئًا, the commentators have given different meanings to it. However, one meaning is أَشَدُّ مُوَاطَأَةً. Muwata'a means muwafaqa, means to be in agreement. So waking up at night is in agreement, is in resonance of the soul finding spiritual knowledge. That's the better time. You are, of course, not yet engaged and occupied with the chores of the day. You have had your rest. It's a very fresh time. So this is the best time to receive those spiritual blessings. So the 5th oath, or the 4th, as if we take Shaf'a wal Watr to be one oath, وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ. Yasri means yamudhi, it goes, when it departs. Like we have in other verses, we have وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا أَدْبَرَ, and the night when it turns its back and goes. Beginning these oaths with Fajr and ending it with night when it departs is very beautiful. So actually, the verse is telling us that, these oaths are telling us that there's always hope. Now, when we move to the other verses, you will see that Allah talks about destruction of certain nations, about man being greedy, about all these things. But at the end, it says, Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna irja'i. Wow. Don't worry about those things. Look at the souls which have found their perfections in this world and go move up towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reside in his neighborhood. Look at that. This night is going to go away. The night of this world, the night of disbelief, the night of all these mischief, corruption, they are going to go away. And وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ. And then Allah says, this is not, of course, part of the oath, is telling us about the importance of these oaths. هَلْ فِي ذَلِكَ قَسَمٌ الَّذِي حَجْرٌ. Is there an oath in that for one possessing intellect? As I said, here it means, is there a proof, a hujjah in this? Is there a hujjah that Allah is conveying you an important message? هل في ذلك قسم الذي حجر. Hijr means intellect. And we have many, many different terms for intellect in Arabic. Almost all of them mean something which restricts. And it is the best sort of allusion to intellect, because intellect restricts us from going beyond the boundaries of justice, going beyond the boundaries of our limit in life, going beyond the boundaries of obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In our interactions, it restricts us to good akhlaq, to ethical action. So that's why almost all terms referring to intellect in Arabic has that hue of restriction. Like, for example, aql. Aql itself means to tie, to bond. For example, when they want to tie a camel, they are doing aql to it. So hijr also means to restrict, to stop. And for example, mahjur is someone who's restricted in his business, in his interactions with people, and many different other different usages which are come. So the aql is called hijr because it restricts us from what is not proper to do. So like aql, nuhya, the same thing, which another term for intellect in Arabic, which means something which prohibits you from doing certain things. So هل في ذلك قسم الذي حجر means, is there a hujjah? Is there a proof in what I say, in these oaths for what I'm going to say? It means it is really haqq. It means in whatever I said, there is enough proof to know that God exists, to know his power, to know his wisdom, to know the way he's administering the world. And like, for example, when you see a harvest, it leads you that there is someone, there's a farmer who has created this harvest. And so this is the meaning, هل في ذلك قسم الذي حجر. Then we go after, certainly what comes after qasam, after these oaths, should be related, should be connected to the qasams themselves. Now, the verses which follow talk about destruction of certain nations. What is the connection between destruction of those nations, which were corrupt, which were corrupting others, which were creating corruption on the earth, and these qasams? Well, don't worry, the night will go away. The Fajr comes, the day comes. Don't look at the corruption in history. Look at what history has given to human race. People like Muhammad and Ali, people like Jesus and Moses, and many, many people who have, despite all these corruptions, in the midst of all these corruptions, were able to look after themselves, were able to restrict themselves, and were able to find the light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, I think we leave the following verses. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi'ad. Have you not regarded how your Lord dealt with Ad? And then there's a description of Ad here, and then talks about Thamud. وَثَمُودَ الَّذِينَ جَابُوا الصَّخْرَ بِالْوَادِ. Did you not regard what Allah did to Thamud? And then it comes to Pharaoh, وَفَرْعَوْنُ ذِي الْأَوْتَادِ, the Pharaoh who used to set up obelisks. We'll talk later on that these autad may refer to obelisks. And then Allah moves on to talk about the human nature, that's how human nature may create these corruptions, and then the opposite of that. Inshallah, we will discuss that in next session, and now we will just have some time for Q&A, inshallah. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you, Sheikh Bahmanpour. If anybody has any questions, you have the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask the question, or type it in the chat box.
Azmat Bhai, can I ask a question?
Salam. Bismillah. Bismillah.
Sheikh, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah.
I just wanted to ask, when you mentioned about washafi wal watar and the even and the odd.
Yes.
And does it, you gave some suggestion about some nights. Obviously, Sheikh Tusi said that the first 10 nights of Zul Hijjah are the ones which are emphasized, yeah? But don't you think that this perspective in the even and the odd does remove Maher Ramazan, the last 10 nights of Ramazan as well? So in the sense that, we are told that Laylatul Qadr could be the odd nights of Ramadan. So don't you think, one of the...
That's a very good understanding, actually. I think it's something to consider. Because yes, as you say, because the 10 nights, if it refers to, if we take odd and even to last night, 10 nights of Ramadan, then the odd nights are very important. However, then the even doesn't go very much with the context that you are setting up, because if the odd nights are very important, then why even nights are mentioned as well? But anyhow, that is a possibility. That's very good.
Jazakallah. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask Sheikh Bahmanpour, or or even type your question in the chat box.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Can I just ask about the structure of the oath that Allah is giving? So I think with the oath, I'm not 100% sure why Allah would need to actually give an oath, because I think the assumption is with an oath, somebody is saying something and then the oath is there to you're 100% guaranteeing it, whereas Allah's words are 100% guaranteed all the time. Is it just for us, or is it because back at the time of the revelation, oaths were used very widely and we don't use oaths these days?
Yes, well, that's a very good hint, actually, to the time reference and time frame, that maybe at those times oaths were very important. Of course, today as well, oaths are important. I mean, in the court you go, you have to take an oath, certainly. However, as I said, the Quran is addressed not only to believers, it's addressed to disbelievers as well, isn't it? I mean, initially when the Quran comes, it addresses everyone. it actually appeals to the human intellect and human nature. Look into your creation, look into your history, look what has happened over the history in the past. And then some people believe, some people do not believe. And then for the believers, of course, there are injunctions. If you want to worship God, this is the way you worship. If you want to go closer to God, this is the way you have to do that. However, initially it's added to everyone. This has come for هذا بيان للناس. This is an explanation for human being in general. Now, if that is the case, then as I said, the oaths are to draw attention to Allah. So of course, Allah doesn't need to take an oath, but because disbelievers as well are, and even us, I mean, as believers, when we look at these oaths and we reflect on that, our commitment to God and our attention to Him is fortified, is strengthened. And therefore, Allah is making these oaths as a hujjah, as a proof that, look, He is there. And if you look at these things, you believe in Him, as I said, to the disbelievers. And then after saying these things, Allah conveys certain meanings to us. So they are important not for Allah to tell us that I'm not telling a lie. It's important to drawing our attention to His power, to His knowledge, to His wisdom, and that is the function of oaths in the Quran.
Okay, so this is more like a highlighting thing, because I would like to think that a Muslim would never need an oath because his words are truthful all the time.
Yes, a Muslim never needs an oath, but maybe you are dealing with someone who doesn't believe you, you know?
Yeah.
That's I mean, if you go to a court and they don't ask you whether you are a committed Muslim or not a committed Muslim. And if you are a committed Muslim, you don't need to take an oath. You have to take an oath, isn't it?
Yeah.
So sometimes we deal with people who, I mean, who are nasty, who do not believe in truthfulness. They always lie themselves, and therefore they require you to swear if you want to prove your point.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Please, anybody unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Sheikh, for that lecture. It was very, very interesting. I just thought I'd share something which I read as a commentary, although this commentary hasn't been accepted, but I thought it was interesting, that Al Fajr could be the Prophet ﷺ, and Shaf'i wal Watr could be Shafi being Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain ﷺ, and wal Watr being Lady Fatima ﷺ, and the Layalin Ash being the other 10 Imams, and wal Layli Idha Yasr being potentially in reference to Imam Mahdi alayhi salam and coming out of the darkness to light upon the return of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. So I just wondered what you thought.
Yes, we have that hadith. That hadith is mentioned in Tafseer al-Qummi, and also it is also reproduced in Tafseer al-Safi. I was just looking for the exact wording of the hadith. It says that, في حديث قال الشفع الحسن والحسين عليهم السلام والوتر أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام. This is the hadith that we have. But about the Prophet and Fatima to Zahra, there's nothing mentioned in this hadith. I haven't seen any other hadith referring to that. Maybe it's this hadith which has been, There's another hadith it's mentioned in Tafsir al-Burhan. It says, Al-Fajr huwa al-Qa'im wa layalin ashr al-a'imma min al-Hasan ila al-Husayn and Ashraf Amirul Mu'minin wa Fatima alayhi salam wal Watf wallah wahdahu. So Fajr is the Qa'im, Imam al-Mahdi. Layal and Ashr, the 10 nights, A'imma from Imam Hassan and Al-A'imma min al-Hassan ila al-Hassan. From Imam Hassan to Imam Hassan al-Askari. So there are 10 Imams, isn't it? Hassan al-Mushtaba to Hassan al-Askari. And Shaf is Amirul Mu'minin wa Fatima. And Watr is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, these are not tafsir of this surah. Whether we take the other hadith from As-Safi, which says Shaf is Hassan and Hussein. Now here in this other hadith, it says that Layal and Ashr are Hassan and Hussein to Imam Hassan al-Askari. And Shaf is Amirul Mu'minin and Fatima. Here it says in hadith of As-Safi, it says Shaf is Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam, Watr is Amirul Mu'minin. Now, as you see, there are differences in these narrations, meaning that these are actually ta'wil of these verses. It's not the tafsir of the verse. It means that, yes, if we want to take this to human world and say who are the most important and most spectacular human beings, yes, we can find Amirul Mu'minin Fatima, which we refer as Shaf wal Watr, and Layal and Ash. We can actually refer it to the 10 Imams from Imam Hassan alayhi salam to Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. As I said, this is not a tafsir of the verse. By tafsir, we cannot find these meanings. We can only see these in hadith, and the hadith is more in the realm of ta'wil in such cases than in terms of tafsir. And then we have to look at the, of course, sanad, or the chain of transmission of the hadith, the authenticity, and all these things. I don't know if that is a...
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's clarified a lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh Bahmanpour. I think we've come to the end of our time very quickly. And again, I apologize to anybody that does have a question. Sheikh Bahmanpour does have another commitment straight after our program today, so I have to keep strict to the timings. I'd just like to take time to thank Sheikh Bahmanpour for again gracing us with the tafsir and allowing us to gain from his knowledge and understanding of the Quran. And I'd like to thank you all for attending today as well. Inshallah, again, the posters will go out and we'll have our next session next Sunday at 8 a.m. Thank you very much, Sheikh Bahmanpour, and inshallah, see you next time.
Thank you, my pleasure. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.